kinda wild how much a novel shape and a fun mechanism can take an otherwise average device from forgettable to captivating. And when it comes to devices from the 2000s, the spring-loaded sliding screen is darn near peak, if you ask me. Flippable clamshells were awesome too, of course, but slide-open mechanisms really made for a premium feel. Schlunking open to reveal various buttons and controls on everything from UNPCs to cell phones to PDAs to portable game consoles. The PSP Go in particular was one that I always lusted after. In 2009, that sleek little thing looked as much like the future as anything I'd seen. But as tablets and candy bar-shaped smartphones soon took the tech world over and kinda made everything boring, sliding screens and their hidden-away controls went away about as soon as they'd arrived. But that's finally changing, at least a little bit, with the introduction of the RG Slide, a handheld Android system that released on June 20th, 2025. It has all the schlonky sliding action I've been craving for years, with a slight push, popping the thing open, using a strong spring-loaded mechanism that's instantly addictive to use. Yeah, while I've dabbled in these ARM-based retro handhelds for several years now, few have grabbed my attention enough to compel me to make a review. But the mechanism and form factor sealed the deal with the RG Slide, and after reaching out to them, Anbernic sent me this review unit to cover however I please. So this is not a sponsored episode, no money was involved, and they had zero editorial input on this video. They'll be seeing this the same time as you. That said, I've been using it for a couple weeks now, and I have some conflicted feelings on this thing, so let's get to it. Starting with the two main draws of this in my view. The sliding screen mechanism and the screen itself. The former is pretty self-explanatory if you've ever had the pleasure of using such a thing. There's an indescribably satisfying feeling provided, especially when it's set up like I have it here, where it'll wake up or sleep whenever you slide the screen up or down. It maintains and restores the state of any running software just fine, and battery life doesn't seem to noticeably decrease in sleep mode, even overnight. So I've left it powered on the entire time I've had it as a result. Just slide open to play, slide closed when you're done. Way more enjoyable than pressing some button to go in and out of sleep. And also just the fact that it's such a well-made mechanism, at least it feels like. Particularly compared to aging 2000s devices that slid in and out and have gotten more flimsy over the years. It's a nice metal plate that it slides across, and while most of the weight is in the bottom, the overall balance is biased towards the top due to the height of the screen, which does take a little bit of getting used to while holding it. And the other main draw is the screen itself, a vibrant 4.7-inch multi-touch display that's not only in a fitting 4:3 aspect ratio, but with a higher resolution and refresh rate than most Android handhelds in this category, 1280 by 960 at 120 Hz. Meaning that not only do you get a perfect integer scale for tons of classic systems, but the high refresh rate means you can apply some fancy features, like black frame insertion and CRT beam simulation shaders on emulators that support them. A BFI isn't something I had experienced on a handheld before, but I love on my high refresh monitors, where a completely black frame is dropped in between every frame of gameplay. It really helps increase the perceived responsiveness and smoothness of motion on these kind of display panels. Unfortunately, this panel is not OLED, and the brightness is only 500 nits max, so BFI makes things a tad darker than I'd like, and that's where the CRT beam simulation shader comes in to reduce the motion blur while keeping brightness intact. Though I still kinda prefer BFI for its CRT-like flicker, but maybe that's just me. Either way, these are great options to have in a handheld. And Anbernic's custom panel they're using here is truly a standout feature of the device, and more than bright and contrasty enough overall for me under normal use. And again, its aspect ratio is 4:3, so it's ideal for the majority of stuff I want to play on here. And even when playing letterboxed 16:9 content, it continues looking great due to its size. It's still larger overall than any of my PSPs, for example. Yeah, on that note, the overall size of the system is notable. Like looking at photos and videos pre-release, I imagined something closer to the PSP Go, but nope! This thing is a chunky brick of a device, and kinda heavier than I expected, at around 14 ounces. Much closer in size and overall bulbous design as the OG DS from 2004, rather than the Sidekick or PSP Go or Xperia Play it seems inspired by. Yeah, just being more familiar with those other sliding devices from the 2000s, that's kind of what I expected mentally, but it's not what you get at all, which is both a good and a bad thing. Bad if you wanted something a little bit thinner, a little more pocketable, and less portly overall, but a good thing because it does feel quite solid in the hands in terms of overall build quality and the weight. I do, however, wish that it was a bit more ergonomically enjoyable, because what you get here is a mixed bag due to the weight and the overall lack of places to grip around back. I can get a decently comfortable position for a little while, but it really doesn't take long for certain games to become quite uncomfortable. And this is due to the aforementioned weight balance of the console, constantly making it want to lean back. And just the overall button placement. In particular, the shoulder buttons, which are in a layout that I have never liked. They're side by side instead of stacked on top of each other, and considering how many games I want to play on here, end up needing the R2 and L2 buttons. I don't know, it's just not very comfortable for me at all. I will always prefer how it is on like the Steam Deck and even some of Anbernic's other devices, where they just have the more traditional shoulder button and trigger layout. And I think there's enough thickness here that they could have gotten away with it on the RG Slide, they just didn't do it. As a result, I'm constantly readjusting and trying to find a comfortable spot depending on what games I'm playing. The first-person shooters in particular, I think, are just awful on here because it's just so spread out with what I've got to do in terms of getting my fingers both over the back and around the top to get to the trigger buttons, and then also have my thumbs on the thumbsticks, which are pretty small and really towards the middle of the console. I do not like it at all for dual stick games. Thankfully, the sticks themselves, I have really no complaints about. They're really comfortable, they're nice to use, they have a solid L3 and R3 click to them, and they should be pretty reliable, I imagine, since they are capacitive. Meaning they don't rely on potentiometers, so they shouldn't drift how those can, but they're also not Hall effect, so you shouldn't have any magnetic interference. As for the D-pad, it's your typical thing. I've never had any problems with Anbernic D-pads, and this one is just as good as all the others I've used. And same goes for the face buttons and start and select, with a nice responsive feel to them, and not being too big, but also not too small or shallow either. It's good stuff. Of course, the buttons don't stop there. You do have a power button on the side, right by the volume controls, and two buttons on the screen itself, right next to the stereo speaker slivers, with the one on the right acting as both a back and a home button, depending on if it's pressed once or held down. And the one on the left switches between software interfaces, which by default will be Anbernic's built-in navigation software for games and the standard Android environment, with this coming with Android version 13 from the factory. And there's surprisingly not much more going on with the external physical hardware itself, especially compared to other devices I've had from them. For instance, there is only one microSD card slot. Now it supports up to 2 terabytes and there's already 128 gigs built in, so you don't need a second slot like you do on some of the others they sell. However, it's a bit different for USB, as there is only one USB Type-C port at the bottom, along with a microphone and a headphone jack, and that is it. No mini HDMI, no way to both charge and have video output at the same time as both functions rely on the same USB port. It's really kind of a disappointment in terms of I/O, again compared to something much cheaper like the RG35XXH, which costs less while also being smaller and lighter. Luckily, there's Bluetooth as you'd expect, so external control options are a cinch, including countless numbers of gamepads and mouse and keyboard controls too, if you're so inclined. And this also has built-in 6-axis gyroscopic controls, as seen with emulating a Wii remote here, and within whatever other emulators and games happen to support it, which I haven't found too many yet, and some that say they do, like Fortnite here, don't work for me for whatever reason, even after enabling it in the options. And speaking of that game and others that tend to push the hardware a little bit farther, that's really the only time I ever noticed or heard the fan around back. At least while I had it set to auto mode in the operating system, it seems to keep it cool just fine and it's not very loud at all, which is nice. Also nice is the battery life. It's actually pretty great. Honestly, my hands end up hurting long before the battery has ever run out, lasting anywhere from 6 to 10 or 11 hours or so for me, depending on how involved the software is that I'm running. And another neat thing I guess it includes on this chipset is an actual FM radio tuner. Yeah, I didn't see that mentioned anywhere in the Anbernic marketing, but it was an app pre-installed, and sure enough, it picks up local FM stations. It kind of makes me wish this also had an over-the-air TV tuner, because why not? Just add all the features. Heck, it's already 90% of the way to being a smartphone as it is. Of course, it doesn't have the antenna to do that, but you can still use it as a VoIP phone if you really want to. Hey, what's going on? What up? What's going on? Ah! And just like every other smart device in 2025, of course they've crammed AI in here, although some of this is actually something I could see myself using. In particular, Anbernic's translation AI, based on character recognition. I believe RetroArch has a very similar thing going on, though I've never tried that because it requires a bit more setup with different services. This just works straight away using DeepSeek though, and it's pretty good from what I can tell. It opens the accessibility doors for some titles that I might not otherwise have tried. Speaking of things I've never tried, yeah, that's really why I enjoy these kinds of handhelds so much. There's something about the form factor that encourages me to experiment with the current state of emulation, pushing hardware that I've never used before and seeing how far it can go. And especially in the case of Android here, I've really never experienced that much. Most of the time I'm messing around with things that use their own custom OS or just a Raspberry Pi or a Mister or whatever, and having Android that's just awesome. I've always enjoyed Android devices, and it's been really fun revisiting the platform and kind of seeing what I've missed out on. And of course that brings us to the main advertised purpose of the RG Slide and devices like it, the emulation. And while you can install anything you like, Anbernic preloaded all the emulators seen here and then some, mostly set up, ready to go from the factory. Just gotta provide your own ROMs and point to the proper directory, and that's it. And man, has it been fun to see what this thing is capable of, with its Unisoc T820 octa-core chipset being a step up from prior devices of theirs I've used before. Apparently that's been out a few years, but paired with 8 gigs of RAM here, I think it's pretty excellent for how well it performs and how long the battery can last. Although, it's not the cheapest device to use this chipset either, so again, the appeal here stems from the overall package with that awesome LCD screen and the sliding mechanism. There's something wonderful about being able to play so many games from the late 70s to the early 2000s on this type of device with ease, up to and including the Dreamcast, PlayStation 2, and GameCube. And even systems like the Wii and 3DS to a degree. Again, this isn't running cutting-edge silicon. There are certainly faster handhelds and Android gaming devices out there, but I've been consistently happy with the compatibility and performance in the Slide here, in particular with 5th and 6th gen consoles. Almost all of those titles, pretty much anything in 3D and an emulator that supports it, is more than happy to run at full speed with 2 or 3 times resolution scaling, as seen here, filling that lovely 4x3 display with crispier, perfectly scaled, higher resolution visuals. You know, it's not always perfect, and it fully depends on the emulator being used and the current state of its development and its optimization, as well as the actual hardware here, since, as mentioned, it's not exactly cutting edge, being from 2022. Certain games on systems like the PlayStation Portable, PS2, and GameCube will fail to reach full speed, no matter what settings are used. But those are thankfully the minority, and I've had tons of fun going through my library on the Slide and playing like 95% of things. At least until the pain sets in. I hate that it's such a problem for me, but it really is. I simply haven't been able to find a consistently comfortable position for playing games that require the use of both the thumbstick and the shoulder buttons. And this is not a problem I have on other handhelds or console controllers or whatever. It's just due to the weird spread out claw grip I have to do, combined with the top heavy balancing act of holding the thing at the right angle. It's seriously painful after like 40-45 minutes. Unless I'm playing a simpler game that doesn't need both shoulder buttons or the joysticks. Those are fine. D-pad and face button gameplay work well for me, but man, what I'd give to have this thing in the weight and the size of the PSP Go, or just closer to that. Because while that thing is even smaller, it's so much thinner and lighter that I don't have the same cramping and strain issues over time that I get on the Slide. It's frustrating, being so close yet still so far with this design. I love the idea. It really is a solid first attempt, but it also very much feels like a first attempt. And that just kind of sucks, because this is effectively now my favorite retro emulator handheld thing that I'll rarely ever want to use. And that's about it for my coverage in this video of the RG Slide. A very nifty, not so little device that isn't the most comfortable to use, but my goodness is it fun in short bursts. And of course that brings us to the question about the price. Is it worth $189 US for the standard version with no SD card, at least here in the US? It's on the edge at that price, but see, that's not really the final price. It's $190 plus shipping, plus any taxes that might apply, and now tariffs, at least here in the USA. And yeah, this is the first time I've myself had to pay to import a device of this price point, which added another $21.91, at least through DHL. So adding another $20 on an already kinda high price, yeah, that's gotta be a thing to consider, I guess depending on how you're buying or importing it. And as much as I enjoy that mechanism, the sliding, the nice screen, yeah, I don't know. Because in the last 5 years or so, the retro scene has received such a massive surge in these dedicated emulation devices that are being offered, and at this point, so many of them are so good that choosing one largely comes down to personal preferences on size and shape and form factor. I think the RG Slide is compelling on all those fronts, but is it enough, seeing as I genuinely do find it very uncomfortable to use for more than an hour at a time, and there are simply too many other comparable devices in terms of performance and price to consider that I would deem more comfortable, despite maybe not having such a nice screen and enjoyable sliding gimmick. So yeah, as much as I really enjoy the idea behind this one, the whole concept of it, I would recommend waiting on some kind of a discount or maybe just a version 2 to come along that's a little bit thinner, a little bit more powerful for systems like PS2 and GameCube. And most importantly, more comfortable ergonomics and designed for adult human hands. Because otherwise I just find myself going back to my much smaller and lighter, less capable systems. Or even things that are much larger, like the Steam Deck. Because even if it's larger and heavier, it's also comfortable and a little better laid out for a lot of the games that I enjoy playing. And when it comes to comfort, there are some things I just can't let slide. If you found this review enjoyable or entertaining or whatever, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Or do you have any memories of sliding devices of the 2000s, and if you'd like to see this form factor continue to make a comeback or not. And I hope you stick around. There are always new and old retro kind of things coming along here on LGR in the future. And of course, thanks for watching.